Hello folks, thank you for joining for another part in the Dungeon Mechanics tutorial series. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how to notify the game when the player has died and also set up a new death state in our animation blueprint when the player actually dies so we can play the animation of the player dying. We're also going to be looking at how to import animations from Mixamo. So I'm hoping you will watch till the end and learn something from today's video. And again, if you like these type of videos, please feel free to hit that like button and also subscribe because we have more and more videos in this Dungeon Mechanics tutorial series coming up. So now that we have our player taking damage, let's go ahead and do a function to constantly check to see if the player is dead or not. This is when the player reaches the health value of 0. To do that, in our third person character, we have access to our BPC player stats, which we're going to right click and say edit BPC player stats, and this will actually open the BPC player stats. We're going to create a new function and say player health status, player health monitor. We're going to get our stat map, go find, and we're going to find our health value, and we're going to take this output and then break it. And we're going to say if our base value anytime goes less than or equal to 0, then we have to tell the game that the player has died. Now, usually we can use a event dispatcher to communicate that the player has died. We can call something like on player death, and then we can call it out. Because we're using interface, I would like to stick with the interface. I like interface better. So I'm going to go to my interface and create a new function and name this notify underscore player death. So this notifies the entire game, whoever has implemented this interface, that the player has died. Let's go ahead and close it. And here, get all actors with the interface, the BPI Dungeon Manager, and notify everybody that the player has died. So that will be notify. Again, if you don't get anything, all you have to do is just say get actor of class. And then off of this, you could say notify player dead, and you got the message here. You can get rid of this actor of class and connect this array directly into this. And we can do a return node off of false. If the player is not dead, just return the function. And this player health monitor function, we're going to actually put it into our update player stats. Right after we add, we want to go and check the player health monitor to see if the player is still alive. If the player is still alive, nothing's going to happen. If the player is dead, then that interface function will fire. Now we're going to go to our third person character, and below the event any damage, I'm going to implement this event, notify player dead. Here, all I'm going to do for now, I'm going to drag off of this and say set movement mode, and that'll be on the character component. And we're going to set this to none. This will prevent the player from moving around. And also, I'm going to just say delay, like a small slight delay, and then I'm going to say destroy. Now, this is where we will play the animation of player dying and stuff, which we're going to do in just a moment. But for the time being, I want to make sure that as soon as the game notifies that the player is dead, because the health value has dropped 0 or below, we are going to quickly destroy it. And we'll come back in here and then do the player death animations in a moment. We're going to also have to notify the enemy AI, hey, the player has died, so we no longer have to attack the player. So we're going to go to our Blackboard folder where we have our enemy controller and our AI controller. And here we're going to go to our class settings. And under implemented interface, we're going to add our interface and compile and save it. Now in our interface, we're going to go ahead and say notify player death. And here we're just going to set this up as a Boolean. So I'm going to say B is player dead with a question mark. And then when this notify comes through, I'm going to go ahead and set this notify to true. We're doing this on the AI controller because this AI controller is shared between all the enemy AIs. So this would shoot out this message to all the enemy AIs. Now we need to make our AI stop attacking the player or moving towards the player when the player is dead. So we're going to go ahead and make this as a blackboard value as well. So we're going to go to our blackboard and then create a new bool and name this is player dead. Put the question mark and make this of type bool. And back in our behavior tree, before we even do all of these sequence, we only want this entire route to run if the player is alive. So off of the selector, I'm going to go and add a decorator and select a blackboard decorator and select this blackboard, and I'm going to select that is player dead. If is player dead is not set, that means the player is not dead, then we're going to go ahead and continue. As soon as the player dead is set, then we're going to stop all this entire functionality. So back in our enemy base, we're going to, off of our event notify, we're going to get the blackboard. Not this one. We're going to get the blackboard, this AI, and we're going to say set value as bool. And this we're going to promote it to a variable, the key name, and name this player status. Compile. And then we need to enter the actual name of the blackboard key. So back in our blackboard, I'm just going to copy this whole thing and paste it here. Compile and save. And one more thing that I do want to do is go to my enemy folder. In my BP enemy base, I also want to implement the notify player dead, implement event. And this is to notify individual characters to stop playing their animation. So we're going to say again, same thing, B is player dead with a question mark. And take this, and then we're going to set it as true. And up here where we're actually doing the attack, before we even start attacking, we want to check to see if the player is alive. If the player is not alive, there's no point of attacking. So we're going to go and set it. And if the player is dead, which is going to be set true here, we don't want it to be attacked. So we want to go off of false. So only when the player is not dead, we want to go ahead and do the attack animation if the enemy can attack. And one last thing that we can do is, again, get the blackboard key. And then we're going to say set value as object. Drag this in here. And this key name will be our target actor, which we previously created. And the object value, I'm going to leave it empty. This will then clear out the target actor. So that means the enemy no longer have a actor or a player that they need to target. Now, if I were to test this out in game, let's go ahead to our enemy base and increase the damage that the enemy is doing to like 50 points just to speed this up, speed the checks, and press play. And then spawn in an enemy. The enemy will come in, attack me twice, and then I'm dead. Because we made a destroy actor, we lose basically the whole control, and the camera just goes to a default point. And if I were to just see what the enemy AI is going to be doing, I could always disconnect this. And then now I can go and check to see what the enemy AI will be doing when the player dies. You can see how the enemy AI just stops. Animation, nothing, they just stop in their track. And this is basically notifying the entire game that the player has died. One other thing that I want to quickly fix is if there was multiple enemies that is rushing the player, you'll notice that how they all kind of like stand behind and wait until the player in the front, enemy in the front clears up before they even move. There's one quick way to fix this, not the optimal way, but a quick fix would be go back to your enemy base and search for avoidance. And then you will get this option for RVO avoidance. Check that and then make this avoidance radius somewhere from like 50 to 100 until you get a smooth transition for the enemy. And if I were to order in multiple enemies now, you'll notice how they will try to go around and then they will try to attack the player. As such, they will just keep going in circles until they find a proper location that will allow them to reach their target, and then they will start their attacking. Again, like I mentioned, it's not the optimal way to get it done, because if one enemy does not have enough room, you'll notice that it's going to just keep going around and around. But this actually should be a very quick fix if your game can actually handle this. For the last part of the tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to play an animation on the player when the player actually dies, and it's kind of like the player falling to the ground. Currently, we don't really have any death animation in the game, but we do have Mixamo. Mixamo is a free tool online that you can use to download animations as long as you just have an account with them. So I'm going to go ahead and download this standing death forward animation and make the player play this animation when they die. Make sure you select the animation, and then when you click on download, you're going to go ahead and download the animation. Once you have the animation downloaded, go ahead and go into your content drawer, go to your third-person character, blueprints, right-click and create a new folder for animations. In here, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop the animation from Mixamo, and it's gonna also bring in a skeletal mesh, which is very important for us to retarget. So I'm going to click on just import all with the default function. You may get some warning about 60 FPS or 30 FPS and stuff like that, just like this frame rate of 60 FPS. You can safely ignore this, and also the smoothing group, you can safely ignore this. Inside the content drawer, you'll notice now all of the materials and also the skeletal mesh from Mixamo, and the animation is also have been downloaded. I'm going to quickly create a new folder for the materials just to keep this folder clean. Select all of these materials, drag it and drop it in here. I'm going to right click on the actual standing death animation and then go click on retarget animation. Here, I'm going to select my skeletal mesh that I'm using for this game. The default one is SKM Mani. Select the standing death forward animation and then click on export animation. Here, I'm going to select my third person character, blueprints, animation folder, and then select the prefix called death, and then click on export and then export. Now you'll notice inside of our third person folder, now there's the new animation, and this is the actual Mani doing the exact same animation. This is how you just simply retarget the animation from Mixamo. Now, when the player dies, we are setting the movement to none, and then here we can simply go ahead and say play anim montage and play the animation or such. But we don't want to do that, because what happens if we do that is actually I can show you, which is even better. If I go and say play anim or play montage, and if I bring in the mesh, and also go ahead, right click on this and say create anim montage, and then drag this one in here. Now watch what happens. When the player gets hit by the enemy, 1, 2, player dies, the animation plays, everything is good, but you'll see the player comes right back up. That's because there's no real stop to preventing the player from going back to its idle state. And that is controlled by the animation BP. So we're going to have to edit our animation blueprint to get that completed. Select your third person character and select this little file icon, and then you will actually get the ABP Quinn. The main one that we're going to be editing is the Mani one. And then so we're going to double click on the Mani. The Mani controls both Quinn and the Mani. We're going to go to our event graph and then create a new variable here and call this is player dead with the question mark. Now we need to somehow notify this animation blueprint that the player is dead, and we can use the actual blueprint interface to communicate here as well instead of having to cast. So we're going to go to our class settings, go under implemented interfaces, click on add and say BPI Dungeon Manager. Select the interface notify player death and then implement event. Off of this, I'm going to go ahead and drag our variable and say set, and then set this to true. Now, if you remember, in our AIC, actually in our third person BP player stats, we're actually calling out the interface function notify player death for all actors with interface. The ABP is not an actor, it's an actual anim instance class. So we need to actually do the exact same notification here, notify player death, to the anim instance. To do that, off of our BP third person character where we get our notify player death, and set our movement mode to none. We're going to get our mesh. And here we're going to say get anim instance. And here we're going to notify player det. And you can simply connect this here and it will still work the same. I know we're taking our notify det to notify det again, and it should still work. We're notifying for the anim instance class rather than every other actor class. Now in our anim BP, this would actually fire. So what really happens when this fires is we need to go to our anim graph. If you have the anim graph like this means you're using the latest Unreal Engine 5. If you don't, you will see something like this idle walk run. Regardless, you need to get into this idle walk run. We're going to right click and add a new state. And this is going to be named as det. And inside of this det, we are going to go ahead and go to our third person animation folder. And then this det standing, the new one that we just got in our game, I'm going to drag it and then connect it here. And make sure you select this and make sure it's not looping because we only want the player to play it once. Now back in our locomotion, we have an idle to walk and run transition and then back transition to from walk and run to idle. We want to go and modify these. Select the idle and idle transition, and where it says should move, we're going to get our B player det and say get, and then we're going to say not Boolean. That's what we're looking for, not Boolean. So when the player can move, and also when the player is not dead, we should be able to transition. So we're going to search for and Boolean and connect this. So for those who don't know, this and Boolean, what it does is and Boolean makes it so that both of these conditions has to pass before it can actually trigger this. Or Boolean will actually make it so that if either of these condition passes, then it will go ahead and set this to true. So we need to make sure that the player can move or should move, and also the player is not dead before we can allow them to go from idle to walking and running. Same thing, back from walking and running to idle, where it says player should not move, then we need to make sure that the player is not dead again, right? Not Boolean is basically saying not. And then again, we're going to do an and, not an or. We need to make sure that both of these conditions are satisfied. Then we can say, hey, go ahead, and then you can go from walk to run and idle. And now back in our locomotion, I'm going to drag this idle from the edges of this idle. I'm going to drag, and then you'll get an arrow that goes directly to the det. Same thing from walk and run. I'm going to drag it in here. In this, I'm going to drag this player dead in this can enter transition. This will tell the game the player can enter transition if they are dead. Or the player should enter det animation only if they are dead. So I'm just going to drag it, compile and save. So if we were to test this now, if you go press play, bring in a new character, hit, you'll notice the player is dying. And then when the player falls to the ground, the player is going to stay on the ground because we have now disabled the idle or to run and also the walk animation just because the player is now considered dead in the game. And that is how you do the player death notification and also to do the animation for the player to die. Instead of using anim montage, we use our actual animation blueprint to get that completed. So folks, thank you again for coming this far in this tutorial series. I really do appreciate your time. And if this type of videos are helping you, please feel free to hit that like button. Please do hit the subscribe button because we have more and more dungeon mechanics video that's going to be released in the coming days. And subscribing to the channel will make sure that you get notified as soon as these tutorials get released so you can start adding them to your game. Once again, thank you and have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you, Merle Peterson, for joining the Patreon and supporting this channel to grow.